Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Today, I'm super excited to have Lauryn on the show, luxury event and planning designer. Thank you so much for joining, Lauryn. How are you?
I'm well, Veronica. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And I love that background behind you. Florals, florals.
And we didn't even plan it. This is one of our design suites from the new launch of our paper source Ines wedding invitation. So I'm glad that you like it.
Ooh, that's
So
so
watch out
exciting.
for it.
Great.
Thank you.
I'll have to keep an eye out for it. I can't wait to check out the whole line.
Yes, tell your brides. Absolutely. And speaking of telling our brides, you've got some excellent tips and advice. So why don't we jump right into it?
Let's get started.
We are so excited. I want to jump in by asking you to tell me and our guests a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this career? How did you launch this amazing career?
So I always say the wedding industry found me. I did not seek it. I actually started my very first college internship. I went to school in Tennessee, University of Tennessee, started out as interior design major, interior design architecture, and then switched to PR and event planning. It's a little bit of a mix of both of those. But I kind of thought I wanted to move up to New York, get into the fashion industry, be the next Anna Wintour. So my very first college internship was actually at Saks Fifth Avenue in Atlanta. And funny enough, the first place that they put me was the bridal department. And I was working with their brides on helping them find their gowns. And I'd really never thought about my own wedding. I'd never tried on a wedding gown before. I was not, into that world yet. But I spent about a week or two working with brides there and then rotated into other aspects at Saks. But they kept pulling me back into the bridal department to help on different days. And I just fell in love with weddings there. And then when I went back to school, I got an internship at a bridal magazine. And then just kind of one thing led to another. After I was done with that internship, I was still reading Style Me Pretty and all the wedding blogs and ended up working for a wedding boutique down in Atlanta before I relocated up to DC and decided to get into the world of event planning. So here I am.
Wow, that is quite the journey. I love that. I think we can totally jump into some of the tips and advice that you have been imparting to your couples. Mm-hmm. What do you think is one thing couples should consider when they're hiring an event planner?
I think that style and design, and today with social media, there's such a great tool to be able to really see people's portfolio. Prior, you could just look at websites and websites just couldn't be as updated as quickly, or you were just getting little tiny snippets. But, through social media, you can really see somebody's portfolio. And I think especially if design, which most of our clients design is definitely an important component, you want to make sure that visually that person that you're hiring represents what you're looking for. No matter how, many great things you've heard about them or how much you love their personality, if the weddings that they plan don't reflect the design that you're going for, that's not going to be a right fit at the end of the day. So I think style and design is the most important, followed by, of course, reputation and connecting.
Okay. So Lauryn, tell us, what's the number one tip that you always share when you're working with a couple?
I think the number one tip is to remember that nobody else knows how the wedding day is supposed to go. I think it's so easy to get so wrapped up in planning. And obviously as planners, as event designers, we want everything to be perfect. Everything is so important. We have an idea of how exactly everything is supposed to go, but nobody knows other than you as the couple what was supposed to happen on the wedding day. So I think that relaxing and not being too hyper-focused on everything being as perfect as you had maybe planned or envisioned in your head is going to allow you to enjoy the day more. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you enjoyed your wedding day and that you didn't spend the entire time stressed about how things were going, and just make sure that you were enjoying the day and not worrying about those little things that may or may not happen on the wedding day.
I think that's such great advice. What do you think is typical for a bride to forget on her wedding day, but that you consider essential?
I think that not forgetting to accessorize your entire look and style your entire look. I think that obviously there's so much put into finding the perfect wedding gown, which is so important, but it's not just about the one gown. It's about finishing and completing that look and how you accessorize it, how you style it, thinking about the jewelry that you're going to wear, the shoes that you're going to wear, your veil, and also a more comfortable second pair of shoes as well, which can be quickly forgotten, but you're going to want those later on in the night as well.
I love that. That's so important. Sometimes when you've been in heels for 7 or 8 hours, just changing into another set of heels, same height, just feels it provides so much relief.
Exactly. I did that for my own wedding day. I had these stilettos that actually I found before I found the gown. I found my shoes, but I thought there was no way I was going to make them through my wedding day. So I just had an inexpensive, but like my tried and true, comfortable, kind of like thicker heel, same height shoe that I could change into, and then a third pair of backup flats in case I really needed to change. But you don't want to just throw on like your beach flip-flops. You still want to have something that's comfortable, but that, you know, if it shows a little bit, it's still going to look good.
I love that you said the same height, because changing into a heel that has a little bit of a thicker heel, but still has that height, will allow the gown to kind of fall as nicely as it did with the original pair of shoes, but the thicker heel will provide a little bit more support and a little bit more comfort.
Exactly. You don't want to change right before your first dance because you're very uncomfortable and cannot do your dance in your shoes. And then all of a sudden have on a pair of shoes 3 inches lower and your whole dress is dragging on the ground, or it's getting stepped on all night when people are dancing. So I think that having the same height is important.
What sources of inspiration do you ask your couples for?
That's a great question. So we love to get an idea of our client's sense of style. And oftentimes it doesn't have to be photos of other weddings. All the time we hear from clients that maybe they're trying to utilize Pinterest or they're saving images on Instagram, but they're not necessarily finding what they are looking for and what they like. And we don't necessarily need to see other weddings. We don't want to copy somebody else's wedding. So we'd love to see just general imagery that gives us an idea of our client's sense of style. This can be, you know, fashion clippings, pictures of different fashion that they love, dresses, bridal or not, that they would wear. This can be interior design, residential design, hotels that they've been inspired by, or restaurants, just anything that gives us some sort of curated design board of who they are, what their sense of style is, but it does not have to be wedding related. And sometimes it's even better when it's not wedding related.
While much of the planning is done by the bride, what are some things the groom can take care of?
So all too often the bride tries to take on everything and not delegate. And the grooms just sometimes don't know what they can do to help. So I think a great thing that grooms can do to help with some of the planning is to do the honeymoon planning. Oftentimes you're planning your honeymoon right after the wedding, and maybe you discuss together where you want to go, but maybe give the groom the reins and have him step up and do some of the honeymoon planning so that you can focus more, or the brides can focus more on the wedding planning itself. Additionally, I think it's really helpful if grooms can be involved that last month leading up to the wedding, just a little bit more, step up their involvement and be there for a little bit more support. There's so many things on the bride's plate that final month. You're having to seat your guests, track down your final RSVPs. So if the groom can help with his family's RSVPs, his friends' RSVPs, find out who's coming and who's not. The bride's also doing things like nail appointments, hair appointments, final fittings for her wedding gown. So just a lot on her plate leading up to that wedding day. So maybe the groom can also be a point of contact for guests that undoubtedly are going to have questions, or helping with final vendor payments that are always due that final month. Just some of those items to help take some of that stress off the last few weeks leading up to the wedding day.
Those are some great ideas. What are some of the things you try to steal your couples away from when it comes to planning?
One thing that we try and steer them away from is just trying to copy what they see everybody else has done. That goes back to kind of what I was talking about with finding inspiration places other than weddings. But I think it's also important that when you are looking at what you want, is to remember that what you see on social media, what you see on Instagram, is just a highlights reel of a combination of a lot of different events. And so especially if you do have a budget in mind, making sure that you aren't exceeding your budget goals with the vision that you have. So making sure that what you're looking for matches with what you are comfortable spending, and not trying to spread yourself too thin by targeting every little thing that you've ever seen and bringing in every little detail. We love all the little details, but target a few specific places that it's really going to make a difference in the event, and not try to do every single little thing that you've ever seen.
That's some really good advice.
Thank you.
Lauryn, what are some of the favorite wedding trends this year when it comes to bridal fashion?
Oh, one thing that we've seen that's really exciting this year is that brides are being a little bit more adventurous with their choices in their gowns and in their fashion. Of course, everyone still loves the classic white gown, but that is not the right dress for everyone. And we've seen a lot of our clients are just being a little more adventurous, choosing something maybe with a pattern or with some color. We recently did a shoot with actually one of your beautiful ball gowns that has a beautiful pastel floral applique on it, which I am just in love with. I know it can be done in all white, but the pastels are just amazing. personalizing, and we're seeing just fun accessories, capes. I think that you actually had one in your most recent collection that you just showed. Capes or different accessories, jackets that you can bring in to complete your look. And so brides are just getting a little bit more adventurous and bringing a little more of their own personality into the fashion that they're wearing.
I love that. It actually makes us really excited to be able to design beyond your typical traditional gown. So we love that brides are becoming more adventurous and taking more fashion risks.
Yes.
Funny story. What's the craziest, biggest event disaster you've ever had?
So prior to this year, I actually did not have very good ones. They were all kind of small little things. I feel like this year our job has partially been fixing and putting out little fires. But this summer we did have a wedding that it was a tinted wedding. We do a lot of tinted weddings. And it was just something completely out of everyone's control. It was thank God it was the day before the wedding. The good news is the end of this story has a good ending, happy ending. But it was Friday, it was around 4 p.m. and a sudden one of those just summer storms popped up and tons of rain was coming down. It rained about 2 inches, I think, in about 15 minutes. We had our decor teams inside the tent. They were working on starting to install, finalizing some of the drape and about to set hard goods. I was on my way to the wedding rehearsal and the gutters of the tent, there's like gutters between the tents, filled up with water so fast. Normally they can empty, but they just couldn't empty in time. And it actually partially collapsed a portion of the tent and flooded the carpeting, the draping, everything that had been being installed for 2 days, 3 days leading up to this wedding was flooded. So I made a quick swing by the tent on the way to the wedding rehearsal, assessed the damage with the decor team, vendor team, tent company. And we were actually able to call in a flood team. A flood team came out that night, set up vacuums and fans and dried all of the carpeting overnight. It was a custom color carpet. There was no way to rip out and reinstall the carpet at this point. But they were thankfully able to dry all of the carpeting overnight so that by 7 a.m. the next day, we were able to get back with load in. It delayed things a little bit, but we were able to, thank goodness, catch up the timeline, get everything loaded in, florals, and by the time guests entered, the carpeting was dry and nobody had any idea what had happened. But it was definitely one of those situations where I was so thankful that the client had a planner and that we had a great vendor team who was all able to come together, come up with a solution, and the client never even knew that this happened.
True testament to why you have to have an experienced event planner to be able to handle situations like this and be able to pivot and think fast with solutions.
Yes. I can't imagine if I had been the bride and you get that call the night before from the vendor team, because without a planner kind of being the liaison and there to help solve the problem, you know, they call the client, they call the bride, and to get that call the night before, I mean, it was scary for me as the planner. So, you know, thank goodness the client had no idea that this even happened and we were able to solve it.
Better for you to deal with it than have the bride be dealing with it, for sure. How do you think brides can personalize their event? What kind of tips and advice can you give to them?
That's a great question. And one of our favorite things to do is to make sure that the event feels like it was that couple's event and not just any event that somebody walked into. And so different ways that you can bring in some personal touches are through thinking things about your relationship, maybe places that you met or where you had your first date or where you got engaged, and how can you bring those items in? Maybe it's bringing in a late night snack from one of your favorite restaurants, or if you met in college, you know, the late night place that you all went to in college. Or maybe it's through naming your signature cocktail after the street name of your first house. Welcome boxes are also a great area that you can really personalize and bring in some fun, personal, unique touches, either to the two of you as a couple or to the area where you're getting married in. So just finding little areas, little niches throughout the wedding day to infuse those personal touches, thinking through a custom menu that makes sense for the two of you, that's based upon some of your favorite things. We even actually had a client 2 years ago who we had the first course serve was the recipe of the first dinner that the bride made for her husband on their first date. And so that was really fun to just bring in that little personal touch of something that they made that was special to their relationship. And you can just really get creative and bring in those little touches in different ways.
When it comes to bridal fashion, you can always personalize your event with perhaps it's an accessory like a cape, or it's a removable train and changing up your look, perhaps selecting a new pair of shoes that might be perhaps more visible with that second look. So there's lots of ways you can go with personalizing the event.
Yes. We're even seeing some clients bring in second and third looks, like a final getaway look for maybe an after party or just a cute little fun getaway look. So I think having a little bit of fun with your fashion and changing up your look throughout the night can be a fun way too.
Well, Ines and I love that. She forced me to have 3 looks, and I got married at 4 p.m. So
oh my
definitely
goodness,
love that idea. All right. So last question. What advice do you have for brides as we move into 2022?
Oh, so I'm sure as everybody's seen, there's a lot of pressure on clients who are getting married in 2022, or even maybe they're looking at 2023, that 2022 is going to be a busy year for the wedding industry. And that's definitely true. And so our advice to clients is that they do things a little bit earlier than normal. You know, do your dress shopping earlier than maybe you might have previously, starting a little bit earlier, at least purchasing by, 10 months to a year out. So if you find a gown you love, don't hesitate, go ahead and get that gown. Same thing with vendors. If you have a vendor who you love and you've always wanted to work with, it is important to go ahead and secure that vendor to ensure that they're available on your wedding date. But at the same time, don't feel too much pressure to rush and plan the wedding too quickly. I think that we're seeing a little bit of that right now, and you do still want to take your time making the decisions that are right for you and for your wedding, and not to rush things. But if there is somebody that's important for you to work with, do go ahead and secure them earlier than normal so that you do get those vendors locked in, and then take your time, enjoy the process, but don't take too much time.
I think that's great advice. Lauryn, I really enjoyed having you here and talking through all of this. It's great advice. Thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a joy and always great to see you.
Thank you. All the best.
You too.